This is the story of the real natural-born killers. Charels Starkweather is known for the 10 days of war across Nebraska. 11 people would lose their lives to this spree killer. His first victim would be Robert Covert, and this would be the beginning of the end for Starkweather. Many movies have been made based around Starkweather and his crimes, like the movies The Saddest, Badlands, California, spelled with a K, Natural-Born Killers, Starkweather, and the 1996 Peter Jackson film The Frightenery. Robert Covert was a gas station attendant at the Cornhusker Highway gas station in Lincoln, Nebraska. He had a wife at home with a child on the way. Unfortunately, he will never get a chance to meet or hold his newborn baby. He would lose his life late November after Starkweather would rob the gas station. Charlie forced Robert into a car and drove him to a remote location. Robert fought with Starkweather for the shotgun and was injured during the scuffle. Charlie Starkweather shot the man multiple times, taking his life. Now Charels Starkweather had been seeing 14-year-old Carol Fugate in 1958, January 21st. Charles pulled up to his girlfriend's home. He was met by the parents of young Carol. They told Charles they didn't want him around their daughter. This set Charles knew a rage. He shot both Velda Bartlett, Carol's mother, and Marion Bartlett, Charles' stepfather. After he took their lives, he set his eyes on Betty Jean Bartlett, who was only 2 years old. He strangled and stabbed her. Charles would then take the bodies and place them out back. When Carol would return home, Starkweather told her that her family had been held hostage. He told Carol if she cooperated with him, her family would live. They remained at Carol Ann's family home for 6 days until Carol's grandmother became suspicious and contacted local authorities. When authorities arrived at the home, Carol and Starkweather were nowhere to be found. August Meyer was a family friend of the Fugates. He spent his life on his home farm in Bennett, Nebraska. He would never marry or move away. At the age of 70, he would lose his life to Starkweather with a single gunshot to the head. Upon leaving the Myers farm, Charles would get his car stuck in the mud some miles down the road. At this point, he would flag down Robert Genson. Charles forced Robert and his girlfriend, Carol King, at gunpoint to drive back toward the Myers farm. He made them stop for the abandoned storm cellar. Here he forced Jensen out of the car. Starkweather then shot Jensen 6 times in the head. Starkweather then made an attempt to rape Carol King, but instead shot her once in the head and stabbed her multiple times. Charles then used Jensen's car to return to Lincoln, Nebraska. While in Lincoln, Nebraska, Charles Starkweather drove up to the Ward's mansion. Charles walked into their home, but they were not there. Unfortunately, Louie Finchy was their maid, and she was present at the time of the Charles entering the Ward's residence. He would quickly take her life. Starkweather then waited for the Wards to return home. First, Claire would return home. She would meet her fate shortly after entering the home. A little while later, Laura Wood would come home and be shot and killed. Starkweather would steal jewelry and valuables before taking the Ward's vehicle. Charles would use the car to leave Nebraska, but on the way to Wyoming, he would be spotted multiple times, and you knew he would have to ditch the Ward's car and steal a new one. Merle Collins was a traveling salesman. He would often sleep in his car, but he would pick the wrong place and time to take a nap on the side of the highway in Douglas, Wyoming, because he would be woken up by Starkweather and then immediately shot and killed. Charles then tried to take the car, but was not aware that the parking brake had been set. A man was passing by and noticed that there might be an issue, so he stopped to help Starkweather. But not long passing, Charles threatened the man, and then they began to fight. A police officer was driving by. He noticed the two men fighting. Upon pulling over, Carl Fugate ran to the cop, yelling, "He's going to kill me!" Starkweather took off from the car and began a high-speed chase from the cops. They reached speeds up to 100 miles per hour. One deputy fired around at Charles' getaway car, shattered the window by Charles, causing the side of his face to bleed. Shortly after he would surrender, Charles would be executed May 23, 1958, 4 minutes past midnight. Charles had no last words and offered a steak for his last meal. He declined and simply asked for cold cuts. Now, he didn't speak much to Carol Fugate, but that's where no one really knows if she was part of the killing sprees or simply the 12th victim. At the age of 13, Carol Fugate was introduced to her 18-year-old Charles Raymond Starkweather by her older sister, Barbara. Dropping out of school, she started working as a truck uploader at the Western Newspaper Union warehouse. Because it was close to the school Carol attended, the two kept meeting every day after school, and he taught her now to drive. Carol Ann Fugate was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on July 30th, 1943, to William Fugate and Velda M. Bartlett. She had one older sister. Her name is Barbara. Later in life, her mother married Marion Bartlett, and they had another daughter, Betty Jean. She changed her name and began working as a janitor at the Lansing Hospital upon her parole release. She married Frederick Clare in 2007 and relocated to Stryker, Ohio. On August 5th, 2013, her husband was killed in a car accident in which she was also critically injured. Carol Ann Fugate is the youngest female prosecuted for the first-degree murder in the history of the United States. She would continue to proclaim her innocence. Without hearing any testimony, Nebraska's three-member Pardons Board rejected a request from Carol. Pardons Board rejected a request for Carol Ann Fugate for the hearing to clear her name for the last time in February 2020. Carol is still alive at the age of 79. She is one of the richest spree killers according to our analysts. Wikipedia, Forbes, and Business Insider. Carol Ann Fugate net worth is approximately $1 to $5 million. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are and who you think she helped Starkweather. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed.